Değerli konuklar,
Distinguished participants, I would like to say welcome to each and all of you. We are proceeding with our first panel, with our first session. The title of this session is Global Agenda of a Leader. We have 5 representatives from the business sector, from our Turkish economy sector. And in this session, we will discuss about what kind of risks we will be managing in the future, what is our expectations. This will be the main focus of this session. 2014 started with great hopes, but unfortunately 2014 ended with disappointments. But when we come to 2015, the growth rate will be much more higher with comparison to 2014. The global growth rate, which is expected for 2015, is 2.8%, and it is 3% for 2016. When you are seeing the developing economies, the emerging markets, you can understand that they are the engine of the growth. But Russia is a concerning example because Russia can actually have a growth rate of 0.005%. And in 2016, we expect that Russia will not grow even further. And their economy will actually be contracting. Brazil, for example, has a lower growth rate, and since it cannot create a variation in its industry, and since Brazil cannot actually conduct structural reforms, the Brazil is not contributing to the growth rate on the global level. In the developed countries, the USA economy is recovering, but this is reflected on the dynamism in the local consumption. The oil prices are reduced, and this is reflected on the economy, but the unemployment rate is quite low for the USA, and USA is in an infertile circle because the demand is not increasing, and since the demand is not increasing, the investments are not increasing. The Federal Reserve will most probably have the monetary expansion policies. 1.12 is being announced, is being expected for the euro-dollar cross exchange rate parity. The Federal Reserve started to cut on the interest rates, and starting from 2015, we expect that this situation will be changing, and this is really important for our own country as well, because in terms of the liquidity, there will be many ambiguities and uncertainties. What about the political uncertainties? In terms of the political instability, we have many problems. For example, we have conflicts in the Middle East, and those conflicts are actually imposing us some problems because we have many problems in our borders. And 2015 is an election year for Turkey, which is also taken into consideration economically. In terms of investment to the human resources and in terms of the demographic transformation, we have to make a good assessment, and we have to create ourselves a competitive ground in the global agenda. We are in an environment which is full of uncertainties, and in such uncertainties, what can we do? Descartes has a good saying: if you are lost in the forest, you can get out of forest if you go on the same direction. If you change your directions all the time, you will not get out of the forest, but you will be lost. This is what Descartes says. And in such uncertainties, managing the risk is, of course, a challenging process for businessmen, but the businessmen are expected to manage those risks. With thanks to the globalization, a very small change in a different part of the world can have huge impacts on us. So how the countries and how the companies should position themselves will be our discussion point, and how can we be flexible in such changes. This will be our discussion point again. The world is tired of the structural reforms because the structural reforms cannot be realized in the fastest pace as a result of such some political issues. But the business world cannot wait for such structural reforms because they have to preserve their competitive power in the global markets. I would like to start with the economic policies. İbrahim Çanakçı from IMF is with us. İbrahim Çanakçı, I would like to ask you first, based on the discussions on G20 and IMF, in the global economy, what is happening? Can you describe us the current situation? What are the main topics of the global economy? If you can elaborate on this issue, I will be glad. First of all, I would like to invite the organizing committee for their kind invitation. Of course, our Deputy Prime Minister and you provided a good introduction for the global economy. So I would not like to repeat what you have said so far. I will try to provide a brief about the global economy, then I will proceed with my expectations. Of course, the global economy is not having the same performance that it has in the 2008, but there is a partial recovery in the global economy. In 2013, the global growth rate was at about 2%, and IMF has an expectations of 3.5 and 3.7% of growth in the upcoming years. The United States have some sort of a recovery, and the United States is actually the engine of this global recovery. In terms of employment rates, there is a partial recovery around the world. Japan currency is losing its value, and in the upcoming years, we expect that Japan will be growing even with a faster rate. In China, the growth rates are decreasing, but we know that this growth is becoming stabilized in China. In three areas, there is a stabilization process. In terms of the local demand ratio in the total demand, there is an increase. As a result of that, the investments are becoming much more secure, and the service sector is improving, and this three factor is really important for the sustainable growth of China, and it is contribution to the global economy, and it is also important in terms of the global imbalances because it will have a reducing effect on the global imbalances. Of course, these are positive events, but there are still some challenges on the global economy. Not all the problems have been solved so far, and I would like to underline 5 important global challenges that we have in the global economy. After the global crisis, the potential growth rate are much more reduced before the crisis, with a comparison before the crisis. For example, the United States have a target of 3.5 percent of growth rate. The European Union is trying to realize a 2 or 2.5% of growth rate, but they are struggling to realize it with the 1%. China knows that 2 digits of growth rate is a dream right now, so they have the aim of providing a growth rate approximately 6 or 7%. So this potential growth rate, how we can increase this potential growth rate, is one of the challenges that we have in our global economy. The second most important issue is the employment rates, because the growth cannot provide employment in many other countries. Turkey is an exception here, because with its growth, Turkey provides employment to many people. But in many other countries, there is a growth without employment. So we should ask ourselves why this correlation between the growth and the employment. And this is one of the issues that many global institutes and agencies are working on. And the investments in many other countries are decreasing with comparison before the crisis. Of course, this reduction in the investments are also having a negative effect on the demands, and in the mid and long term, this also negative effect in terms of the capital accumulation in the industry. So we should ask ourselves, how can we increase the investments, and how can we provide new models for the investments? And this is one of the issues that the G20 and the international institutes are working and discussing about. The global trade volume is decreasing, unfortunately. If you compare the global trade volume before the crisis, you will see that it is half of it, because in the past the global trade volume was increasing by 7%, but right now the global trade volume is increasing approximately 3 to 3.5%. There are some structural reasons for that, and there are some conjunctural reasons for that, but mainly these structural reasons are imposing a negative effect on the global trade volume, and this issue has been tackled on the global level. The income dissemination, the income distribution actually is deteriorated. This income distribution has a negative impact on the social level, but this income inequality also has a negative effect in the growth rate of for companies. And that is also one of the issues that the countries are trying to tackle. Of course, there are many other topics, many other challenges that we encounter today, but during the rotating presidency of Turkey in the G20, these 5 topics are our priorities. Our Deputy Prime Minister spoke about other 11 main important challenges on the agenda of the G20, but I try to underline the 5 most important of them. But I believe that Turkey has a good start in terms of discussing those important challenges on the global economy during its term as a rotating president in the G20. But hopefully, if those issues have been tackled, it will have a positive impact on the global welfare. Thank you so much. I would like to turn to our other panelists. Çanakçı spoke about 5 important challenges, and it is on all of our agenda. Based on those factors, what do you think about those challenges based on the business perspective, based on your situation as a leader? What do you think about those global economic challenges, and what can the business world can do in order to tackle and eradicate those problems? I would like to first pass the microphone to Begümhan. Thank you very much. I would like to welcome each and all of you. We know that the Turkish agenda is very crowded all the time, because there are many political issues, there are many economic issues, and I know that such platforms will be proven to be fruitful for discussing those challenges. Hopefully this summit will provide inspiration and new ideas for each of us. İbrahim Çanakçı actually make a good summary about the global economic challenges. He said that the growth rates will not be the same in the past. The global trade volume is decreasing. So what will the business world do in such cases? I believe the biggest challenge and biggest opportunity comes from digitalization. In the companies who are not reaching to digitalization, the companies who lack a digital strategy in whatever sector they are going to lose. There is such a fastest pace of digitalization in the globe. We have to underline this fact. Digital transformation is one of them. So what does this mean? How can we become a company with higher technologies? Let's speak about the retail sector, for example. managing their suppliers, managing the HR issues. They have to collect data all the time, and they have to take their decision based on those data collection. If they cannot digitalize themselves, those companies will have huge problems. So the digital transformation is very important in our future business models. And there is a second pillar for the digitalization that I would like to underline here, the digital strategy, I'm calling it. So the companies who has not a certain digital actually a strategy, they are look like actually the infantries who are going to war without a shield. They are open to many attacks because a company in the United States can have a huge impact in the global sense. For example, Uber is one of them. Uber transformed the transportation system in the global sense. Netflix, for example, transformed the TV broadcasting in the global manner. In the automobile sector, for example, right now we are speaking about the electronic cars. Tesla is producing them. So this is changing and transforming the whole sector. And there are some hyperscale companies like Google, Amazon. They are not only changing the sector they are living in, but they are changing the whole ecosystem. Amazon was thought to be a e-trade company, but right now Amazon becomes the biggest publishing house in the world. In the past, the Google was thought to be the search engine, but right now Google is producing cars without humans. The cars which can actually operate without human beings. So that hyperscale companies are changing the whole ecosystem. So the CEOs, if they would like to understand what kind of threats that their sectors are going to face with, they should assess also those hyperscale companies. Of course, one of the most essential things of the digitalization is stemming from the innovation. McKinsey had a research. In the latest research of McKinsey, they asked to CEOs of hyperscale companies, 1,800 of CEOs have been asked, and what is the biggest growth factor for your company? This was the question, and 90% of them said innovation will be the engine, the triggering force for growth. How can we integrate and embed innovation into our business culture? This is one of the most important questions that we ask ourselves, that we have to ask ourselves. And the CEOs should conduct many studies in order to integrate the innovations to their business culture. We have a target of making Turkey to become one of the 10th largest economies. The GDP of Turkey is approximately $820 billion, but the GDP, I mean the income of the Walmart is even higher than the Turkey. So the CEO should internalize this digitalization, and they should take further steps if we want to create an international brand and if you want to make Turkey the one of the 10th largest economies. Thank you very much. Mr. Coombs. Mr. Coombs, Begümhan was speaking about creating a difference, and she spoke about the importance of digitalization. So based on that digitalization, you are working with different sectors and you are investing different sectors. According to you, in the agenda of a leader, what should be in the upcoming years? That is my question.
Much for having me. It's great to be here at Uludağ. I'm very, very relieved, actually, when I got up this morning that I had a good pair of socks, because from where you're all sitting, it could expose me very unfortunately. That was my initial agenda of the day. Let me now share with you a little bit more of an agenda in terms of how I think about business and what Ashmore is trying to achieve. As you probably know, we're an asset manager, and my duty to my company and my shareholders is to think long-term about strategy and short-term daily about execution and getting things done. So we're always thinking about how to deploy capital and to mobilize resources and do the right things. So we care about performance, margins, assets under management. We really care about giving consumers choice so they can diversify their risk and return. But the thing that we strategically are really grappling with and trying to build, and the reason we're here in Turkey and have been here since 2008 physically, is to mobilize domestic savings and to create strong domestic local asset management businesses that are able to bring innovation in terms of the way people manage their money, in terms of the way they look after their money, and give them a business and a feeling that they're really getting part of what they want to in terms of their own economy whilst getting wealthier. One of the questions that was posed to me before I came was what intrigues me. And there's a lot of things that intrigue me, but the ones I'm prepared to share with you are, in terms of Turkey, I'm very intrigued by the state at which Turkey finds itself, which is a very low domestic savings rate, with some very interesting advantages in terms of a dynamic private sector, some short-term advantages from things that have been happening vis-a-vis the oil market. And yet a system where things have been very concentrated in terms of the levers of being able to get business done. And so where you've got a set of things that the authorities are trying to achieve, where what they will do is provide a level playing field for domestic and foreign players in things like asset management. So grappling with how to provide competition, consumer choice, performance-based investing. So that's really interesting to me, and whether that will be achievable and how the Turkish authorities will deal with that. And the other thing that really intrigues me, that I think is a big question now, is on a global sense, is how will US foreign policy change with a change of president? Whoever it is, how will the Americans re-engage or engage differently within the Middle East? I think that's a very intriguing question for all of us in this room and across the globe.
Çok teşekkürler. Ben aslında şimdi...
Thank you very much. Right now, I would like to pass the microphone to Hakan Binbaşgil, because Mr. Coombs spoke about the local savings, the domestic savings. So, with the eye of a banker, when you evaluate and when you assess the banking sector in Turkey, and as far as we know that the banking sector is the triggering force for the industry, what do you think should we discuss about in our agenda on behalf of the banking, on behalf and with the eye of a banker?
As a matter of fact, we have been talking since the morning that economies all around the world have not been fully normalized due to the high volatility. It's still going on. As was mentioned, growth rates are decreasing. Maybe I can also talk about geographical risks, because in the environment Turkey is in the north, in the south, in the east, we still have challenges we are facing. Maybe there will not be major impacts on economy, but I think they have to be taken into consideration as discussion points. Under the light of all this, of course, I think as a general director of a bank, I think what we have to manage includes some short-term points, some short-term projections. But in the banking world, sustainability is the most important factor. You may have quite great statistical data, but active quality and the long-term and mid-term management of your institution inevitably become your agenda items, actually most important items on your agenda. Risk management comes into play when you are in an environment of volatility. Your own resources and equities have to be protected in such an environment. I believe we have other bankers among us. One of the most important items on their agendas have to be this too. Well, it was already discussed. In the midterm, we have projections, but we need to have prospective measures as bank CEOs, because as a CEO you have to be adapted to the future. Once you're talking about adaptation to the future, not only for banks but also for a lot of institutions, there are 3 or 4 some important factors that force you into change. Digitalization is one of those. You cannot ever isolate yourself from that. Secondly, our customer and client profiles are changing. They expect different things from us. We have to understand them better. And even the competition environment is changing. Fourth of all, regulations come into play in the banking area. It's not applicable only for Turkey. All around the world, especially following the recession of 2008, in the next years, in the field of regulation, great changes took place everywhere in the world, and the reflections of on corporations was great. These four factors inevitably keep you pressurized. They forced you into changing. You are asking about us specifically. We are making a lot of efforts to manage all of these factors. We are trying to maintain our figures. We are trying to maintain our active parity. But also in the meantime, Turkey is growing. You have to be a part of it with constant market activity. In the meantime, all you have to do is to manage risk. We are trying to carry out customer-oriented banking. SMEs and other parties are advancing quite fast. Individual banking is a field we are booming in. You have to juggle all these balls all at the same time. As I said, we are investing in technology since the beginning of 2010. Every year we have been investing around $150 million. And I'm not talking about daily changes. We are trying to adapt to new technologies, advancing cutting edge technologies. We are also believing in mobility for both our clients and our employees, because for a bank's future this is quite a critical point. The number of our mobile clients is actually increasing at a blinding speed. A few years ago we had a few thousand people using mobile platforms, but now we are dealing with about 1.5 million people, and 1/3 of our clients are not even visiting the physical facilities anymore. The environment has changed a lot. The trends have to be analyzed to see what you can actually do in the banking area and to transfer them into the mobile realm. Efficiency is being approached quite carefully too. Statistics wise, in the recent years, we have ensured up to 20% efficiency gain. I can say this about that. Finally, the human factor is one of the most prioritized points we are taking into consideration, because it is the service sector we are involved in, and youth is emerging in a different profile. Turkey is a young country. Currently in our bank, the average age is around 30 to 33. People are young, and on one side, while trying to understand our clients, we are trying to also understand our young people, young employees, and I can say that we are investing a great deal of time into understanding them. We are trying to do different things like adverse mentoring. Even though we are innovators, we are not as young as them. We want to understand what young people think, how they view our bank. This means we are being actually mentored by them. We do not mentor them, especially when it comes to risk management. This reverse mentoring starts to be activated. We have also future transformation projects with which we want to establish balance. Transformation is one of the things we are thinking hard on. Mr. Gökhan, Öğüt, now I would like to talk to you. Technology has been mentioned a few times. Also mobilization was mentioned. The communication sector is one where competition is heated. So all of these changes are a burden that you shoulder as a member of the communication sector. What kind of future do you project in the upcoming days? In this environment of competition, what can Turkey do? What points can we reach? And how many opportunities are there in terms of technology utilization? Thank you. I would also like to greet everyone. It is quite delightful to be among you on this occasion of the summit too. We started with global economy in the morning. We talked about the shrinkage of growth rates. At that point, on behalf of Vodafone Turkey and Vodafone Global, we have also been thinking about growth. Mrs. Begum touched a nice point. Digitalization is going to be an instrument in terms of fueling growth. On a higher level, on the basis of countries, we think it's a great opportunity, both in the global environment and on a national level. It is a truth that technology utilization is a growth opportunity. So we are trying to make this real. I would like to start with Europe especially. It was mentioned that there is a shrinkage too. The new European Commission that is at duty for a period of 5 years has determined a strategy called a common digital market, and about $5 billion can be the additional market it can create. This can also create a great deal of employment increase. As Vodafone, we want to become a leader at this point, and in Berlin in December we carried out a conference called Digitalizing Europe. Angela Merkel was a participant too. In the conference, we talked about digitalization of Europe and what Vodafone can bring on to the table. It was a lengthy discussion. It was also in November 2013 when we also carried out a 5-year strategic program for digital transformation of Turkey. We actually announced it back then and we have been implementing it. And at this point, in order to do that, we needed broadband infrastructure to act as a catalyzer for growth rate. Some serious steps have been taken in this regard, as seen in the World Economic Forum's studies in terms of creating this infrastructure, increasing the number of households with access to broadband connection is quite significant. In this regard, creating broadband strategies in Turkey is being discussed too in the 62nd government program. It is clearly stated that it is a government goal to increase broadband users in Turkey. Since the beginning of the first presentations, we have been talking about slowing, stagnant growth rate, and broadband access in households, also in corporations, may be a way out of this challenge. Thank you. Actually, the way I view it, we are all the we are all aware of the fact that the world is going through a period of slow growth rates. In order to differentiate ourselves, we have to think about all the possibilities. So, Mr. Çanakçı, back to you. This is going to be also tied to the first question. In this period, the IMF maybe recommends some economy management reforms for countries like us. As it was said, political governments may not always be willing to carry out economic reformations So you may probably lead us with your IMF recommendations. These are going to be discussed in G20 and B20 meetings too, I know. Thank you. As you know, the International Monetary Fund deals with public finance, financial sector, management of capital movements, and so on. These are some of our focuses. In recent years, the International Monetary Fund has been trying to emphasize on economic reforms too. But critical question is, what kind of reformation areas should we focus? The reigning opinion is that macro stability and uh, supporting growth rate should be the focus of our consideration. We can do this in collaboration with global organizations like the OECD. And in the latest periods, we have been thinking about not only developed countries but also emerging and underdeveloped countries too. As for recommendations about public finance, as you know, following the global recession, especially in developed countries, debt burden has increased quite a lot, and this is not sustainable. Those countries also address this issue with fiscal consolidation. When implementing these consolidation programs, you have to have minimum negative impact in growth and uh, employment rates. On the contrary, all your spendings and actions have to have a positive impact on them. As for emerging and underdeveloped countries, we would like to have the tax base expanded and public financial management systems expanded. However, following the financial recession, the common recommendation of the Monetary Fund has been to promote efficient infrastructural investments as part of national spendings, public spendings. Efficiency and productivity is the focus in this recommendation here. In the recent years, also the decrease in energy prices following global energy subventions has opened a window of opportunity. In some countries, energy is quite a big problem, but it is on the contrary in some other countries. For example, in Turkey, there are no incentives, so the burden on public finance is quite big. Some of the countries are also reducing the incentives, and they want to transfer the incentives to the social area. In summary, about public financing, this is all I can say. On the monetary policy side, the fund usually takes into consideration if there is a risk of inflation or deflation in a country. So our recommendations change based on that. If you take a look at developed countries, there is an environment of quite a low information and there is a deficit in production. There is a risk of big deflation. And the fund recommends them to carry out uh, monetary policies which promote growth rate and employment. However, in other countries where there is fragility due to high inflation and dependency on external resources, we recommend monetary policy to be carried out in an expanded environment because they perform limited monetary policy management. The fund also underlines two important points about monetary policies. One is for developed countries. As they normalize their monetary policies, the decisions they make will have a fallout a spillage effect on other countries, and they have to take this into consideration too. We are underlining this recommendation. The second point we underline is this. Okay, you can achieve monetary expansion and liquidity, but it is important to see if it converts into actual demand. In some countries, observations show us that this liquidity expansion's transformation into real actual demand is not realized. It is generally used to fuel short-term gains. This is one of the other points that we take into account in our recommendations. As for structural reforms and our recommendations, the common recommendations for all countries is that there is a loss of acceleration in structural reforms. So we want them to re-accelerate structural reforms. Of course, there are intrinsic terms and conditions that are standing out in different countries within the framework I have just mentioned. The recommendations, the International Monetary Fund include improving the investment environment, rendering workforce markets flexible, achieving financial spread over the base, and coming up with active regulation of product policies and diversifying your production and export ranges. Especially in terms of commodity-oriented economies, this is the recommendation. SMEs should receive better financing opportunities and infrastructural investments should increase. These are the primary recommendations. And in the recent years, we have also been considering participation of our women into economy and workforce. As we have a moderator, a female moderator, this has to be mentioned too, because participation of females in the workforce is not in a good state, especially when it comes to socially deprived countries where women are also socially deprived. Finally, I have to mention global trade, because the International Monetary Fund's one of the primary goals of the International Monetary Fund lies in and is embedded in global trade. We need facilitation in this area. In G20, we emphasized on bilateral and regional trade agreements. These should not cause fracturing in overall global economy and trade. The fund would like to make sensitive recommendations in this area. In brief, these are all I would like to say for your question. Now I would like to turn to dear Coombs. From the perspective of an investor, in the next years, if we think about developed and emerging countries and their implementation of reforms and monetary policies, what kind of criteria are going to be important for business decisions, investment decisions? What are your priorities in this age of low growth rates?
Thank you. Our priorities are always an environment where we can compete on a level playing field, where we can bring capital and the rule of law prevails, such that we can always execute what we try and execute. Actually, for us, a lot depends on the price. So if a company or a country is performing at a certain level, our interest in investing is whether we can acquire it or invest in it at a point where it can move from being a cheaper place to a more expensive place. As in, we can take advantage by providing capital to make more money out of that. That's really our job. We like countries where government and authorities are open to dialogue. We've been doing this for ages, and we've seen a lot of cycles in emerging economies. From default, removal from international capital markets, collapse of domestic capital markets, through to converting debt into equity, through into international capital market access again. And so really what we want is an environment where government and the authorities and the entrepreneurs are interested in dialogue such that we can put capital to work at a price that we feel comfortable with, and then we can make our money and move it into various sectors that make sense. So it's things like education, infrastructure, the ability to apply our experience. And where infrastructure and education is slightly missing, that we see as an opportunity, not a problem. So people that are open-minded and want to work with foreigners on a level playing field, we love to work there, and we want to become domestic in our way and mobilize domestic capital, not simply foreign capital.
Çok teşekkürler. Ben bayağı bir zaman sorunumuz var.
Unfortunately, we have a time limit, so I would like to conduct one last round, and this last round we will focus on Turkey. Mr. Binbaş, we will start with you. With the eye of a banker, and by the way, I'm not focusing only to the banking sector, what do you think? Which sectors will be the star sectors? This SMEs have been discussed so far, and SMEs are on the agenda of the G20. What can do the banking sector do for the future, and in terms of improving the quality of the competition in the Turkish economy, what will be the role of the banking sector? So we would like to listen to you. Of course, in the global sense, we already said that there are some uncertainties and there are some ambiguities. But if you assess the Turkey, the potential growth is quite remarkable. And when you assess the Turkish economy, there are many advantages that we have in our hands. It was already underlined by Deputy Prime Minister. Our budget discipline is one of our advantages, and the health sector is really important, and the financial sector, healthy financial sector, is really essential. Because for a country to progress, the healthy financial sector is an essential factor. We have a problem of current account deficit, but as you all know, this current account deficit of Turkey is stemming from the energy imports. So these reducing oil prices is constituting another advantages for the Turkey. Right now, in the global sense, there are lower interest rates, and since the energy prices are reducing, we have such a perfect environment for such reforms in the Turkish economy. In order to improve the situation of Turkey in terms of the current account deficit, there has been some macro measures have been taken, some prudential measures have been taken, and increasing the domestic savings is in our agenda right now. In the last years, there is an improvement which is going beyond 12%, which is going from 12% to the 6 or 7%. Of course, there is a credit expansion. There is actually a decrease in the credit expansion in Turkey. The commercial credits are increasing. The corporate banking sector is taking steps with regards to that, and the credits of the banking sector is right now channeled to the commercial credits rather than the individual loans. And I believe this is a very healthy implementation. The consumer credits are not increasing. I mean, the increase rate for the consumer loans are only 15%, but when it comes to the SMEs, the loans are increasing by 20% in Turkey. Turkey has 2023 goals, And in order to support and realize those goals, the Turkish banks should not have any problems in terms of issuing loans and credits. But sustainable profit for the banks is essential. If you want a bank to issue credits, their equities should be sound. And we have an important concept which is called the capital adequacy ratio. It should be 12%, and we make an assessment about the capital adequacy ratio, and we thought that if the credit numbers should be increased by 4 or 5% in Turkey, the equity yield should be increased for the banks in Turkey. In the last couple of years, unfortunately, due to high volatility and due to increasing costs of the interests, has a negative effect because banks never want actually increasing interest rates, and the regulation costs are increasing again in Turkey. All of such factors have a negative effect for the equity efficiency. It actually reduced from 15% to 11%, and right now we have the equity efficiency of 10.6%. This equity efficiency should be increased to 15 or 16% if we want a bank to provide higher credits with higher capacity. Of course, sometimes we are declaring high profit margins for the banking sector. For example, in the last year, the banking sector had a profit of $24.7 billion. But the banking sector has an equity of $232 billion, so the profit margin in total sum equals to 14.6%. If we improve those situations in terms of capital adequacy ratio, all of these sectors, starting from transportation, education, all of those sectors will be improved. That's what I think. Mr. Öğüt, we are speaking about the capital adequacy. Our Deputy Prime Minister spoke about the factor efficiency, and he underlined the importance of the factor efficiency. Based on your sector, which is investing on the technology and the innovation, within the perspective of your sector, what do you think about the future of Turkey? Do you think this capital adequacy can be improved, and what kind of impact that capital adequacy improvement will have on your sector? This broadband, I spoke about the technology of the broadband, and this is a huge opportunity for Turkey. And this technology is becoming much more disseminated and much more advanced. And we have an aim for the numbers of the subscribers for the broadband, and we are preparing a roadmap in order to improve that technology. 4G authorization schedule has been announced recently, and the Ministry of Development last Friday has announced a strategy document for the information society. This document is really important because this document has many actions in 8 important subjects. And between 2015 and 2018, we have many actions which are going to be implemented, and those actions and their outcomes will be monitored every 3 months. These documents and these targets should be implemented as fast as possible, and the dissemination of the broadband in Turkey should be realized. And if that can actually be realized, then we will have a brighter future. This 4G technology will be launching very soon if there is no change in our agenda, and this 4G technology is a huge opportunity because with the 3G technology, we benefited from that opportunity, and I hope that our companies, our corporate institutions will have the utmost benefit from 4G technology. And on behalf of Vodafone, we are ready to support this process. Of course, this 4G requires many investments because we have to invest in the broadband technologies and the fiber internet technology. And there are many steps to be taken if we want that infrastructure to be established. If that infrastructure can be realized, it can only be realized with the support coming from different stakeholders. This broadband infrastructure, which actually attracts many investments, will provide more digitalized experience to its customers, and our companies will be further digitalized. And of course, those kinds of summits are really important for lightening on the issue of the digitalization. And this digital transformation, which starts from the companies, can be realized, and 2015 and 2016 is critical for them. Mr. Coombs, you spoke about the low levels of domestic savings in your speech. So you spoke about the structural reforms which is required for Turkey. What do you expect for Turkey in the future with the eye of an investors? What do you want some things to be continued, and what do you expect for Turkey in the future?
The way we look at Turkey now is a little bit like we looked at it when we first decided to establish a local asset management business. A great demographic, that low domestic savings rate, which the government realizes an issue and has to address, and a total lack of independent asset management activity, which means it provides a huge opportunity for us. So we think Turkey is a very interesting place for us to be and to expand. I think that one of the things that we're exploring at the moment in our global business, and the gentleman from Vodafone mentioned before, is that the pace and expansion of technology and the impact that will have, not just on countries, but on businesses. One of the things we're thinking about very actively is how we will be able to use and enable some of the largest growing companies to provide asset management services through technology, through the internet. So I don't think asset management will solely be delivered by asset managers going forward, and that will keep us honest and focused on the most important things, which are performance and governance. I think when we look at Turkey today, there's a very interesting conundrum, which is how to increase the domestic savings rate in a way that's long-term, and to try and develop the things that are really important going forward, which is infrastructural investment that's efficient and infrastructure in the right places, picking up on what Mr. Babachan said. It needs to be infrastructure that will really feed through to domestic growth, but you need long-term savings for that. And so the whole establishment of a pension system, which the government's made a good start on, is going to need to move from very short-term, well, from what is really quite short-term in the way that the pensions savings sector is structured at the moment, to take it longer, to make sure that people are incented to be in longer, so that that domestic pension system can help stimulate infrastructure. That's what we do in other countries, and we very much like to do here. So I think the outlook is interesting for us in Turkey, and I think as long as the playing field is level and performance and governance are what drives asset management, we think we've got a great chance to be a big business here.
Thank you. Sayın Faralyalı, şimdi...
Ms. Faralyalı, I would like to ask you one specific question, because you are investing in many different sectors. In the upcoming years, what do you think about the sectors, which sectors indeed will take the ground? If you evaluate the efficiency in the business world in Turkey, in terms of competitive power, which sectors do you think will have an advantage in the future? Our main sectors are retail sector, energy sector, and the media sector. And our focal point will be based on the operational efficiency in those sectors. Media is our priority profession, of course. And the biggest transformation is taking place in the media sector. On Doğan Group, on behalf of the Doğan Group, it is directly dependent on the management skills of the companies indeed. On behalf of Doğan Holding, we have a very good footprint for the digital world. The 50% of the people who are going online has somehow communicating with us. They are visiting our websites, they are downloading music, they are actually purchasing books, they are reading news or the newspapers online. The biggest threat and also the biggest opportunity for us is to get acquainted with our customers, and we should actually enrich their experiences, and we should facilitate the lives of our customers. And apart from that, we should provide added value and extraordinary tools for the advertisers which are collaborating with us. If we can do this, we will be the leading entertainment and the culture platform for the Turkish society. If we can do this, it will be a role model not only for Turkey, but also for the global sense. And one of the most important thing for each sectors is directly correlated with the good management skills. If the leaders can internalize this digital transformation and the innovation, they will have the competitive power and competitive agency in any sector. Because the human power, the human resource, our demographic attributes is a good competitive advantage for us, but if we can internalize this innovation, we will be much more successful. You said it was the last question, but I would like to raise another issue about the economic reforms, because it has already been mentioned that the Turkey should conduct an economic reform. If you assess the indexes on the global level, there's a global innovation index. Turkey ranks in the 54th place. In terms of social development index, Turkey ranks in the 64th place. In terms of freedom of speech index, Turkey ranks unfortunately in the 154th place. And there are some issues which are not discussed in the economic forums. In terms of happiness index, Turkey ranks in the 77th place. Of course, the companies who are actually in the top of such lists are the developed countries. I believe one of the most common factor for all of those indexes are directly correlated with freedom, because freedom is essential for innovation, and innovation is essential for the development of our economies. Deputy Prime Minister and Mr. Çanakçı summarized what we should do in the future. But when it comes to the freedom of speech and when it comes to actually free discussion environment, I believe those issues are essential for Turkey and essential for the development of Turkey. Cultural reform is also important, because dreaming is not welcomed in the Turkish culture. Just think about a Turkish family. A young man comes to the house and says that I will solve a problem in our village. The mothers and the fathers says, be realistic. It is not duty, it is not your job to solve all of the problems. Unfortunately, our young population have a problem in terms of dreaming, and we should provide incentives for them to dream. 10 years ago, I had an MA in the Stanford University for the MBA, and this really inspired me. Because in the first year in Stanford, we have 300 students, and those 300 students are remarkable students, and 300 students listened to actually the success stories every day. And each success story, that individual spoke about trying and failing and dreaming, trying and failing all the time. At the end of the first year, first class, everybody wanted to become an entrepreneur, because everybody had such a courageous ideas and such a courageous dreams. Of course, at the second year, we encounter with the realities of the life. 80% of them didn't become an entrepreneur, but what I'm trying to say that my class friends are right now investing $10 billion or $20 billion right now. So what I mean, we should internalize that dreaming and that innovations, and the NGOs has a huge role about this, and the media has a huge responsibilities for supporting dreaming because we should increase the social awareness. So we should hear statements like I dreamed and it happened. Such events, such news should be supported in the media as well.
Evet,
I guess I can summarize what you said. Without freedom, there is no creativity, and without creativity, there is no innovation. Thank you for the contribution. Dear Çanakçı, we are going to complete the session with you. Especially in the economic area, you were economic rising area of Turkey, you were an undersecretary of the treasury. You know the economic dynamics of Turkey. I would like to ask you about Turkey's current stance, need for reforms, and under the light of global developments, your opinions about 2015 and the midterm. Well, thank you. We are running out of time, so I will keep it brief. In particular, I will talk about the last 6 months and short, mid, and long-term considerations for the future. You all know that in October last year, budgets and projections for the next year were being prepared, and then we had the oil price drops. So all analysts had to refresh their growth rates and deficit currency deficit estimations. Also, the International Monetary Fund had to refresh its views. Growth rate was refreshed to be 3.4, for example, and inflation was estimated to be from 7 to 6%. So as of the second quarter, we also saw a quite big movement in exchange rates. There was an increase. But in the short term, there are going to be 2 points to be influential: currency exchange rates and oil prices, and when they will become stable. The general expectation about oil prices is that the latest price decrease is going to continue for a specific period of time. In that sense, in terms of current account balance, despite exchange rate differences and decreases in demands of investors, the drop in oil prices is going to support current deficit. The Deputy Prime Minister talked about foreign exchange rates, although not entirely. To a large extent, the mobility of currency exchange rates is going to be influenced by the mobility in the USA and the Federal Reserve's decision on interest rates. These are going to be determining factors. However, on the other hand, from an international perspective, how long this trend is going to last is quite uncertain. It was also mentioned by Deputy Prime Minister, but 2 points will be influential. First, the increase in the value of the dollars based on how it will influence negatively employment rates and such in the USA. Secondly, in the Eurozone and in other parts of the world, how rapid the recovery process will continue. The main determining factors are going to be these, and internally, primarily the central bank and all other relevant institutions are trying to watch closely the inflation increases. Secondly, the impacts of currency exchange rates on the reliability perception of households and individuals, and also third, their influences on economic foundations and expectations. It is difficult to say that there is a coherence between the currency exchange rates and Turkey's economic foundations. Currently, we have a strong public finance and banking system and debt ratios in the level of households. These continue. The biggest area of fragility, which is current account deficit, is improving too. This means in the short term, based on currency exchange rate movements, I don't think we should have any negative expectations for economic foundations of Turkey. This is what I believe will happen in the short run. As for the mid and long runs, what will determine Turkey's economic performance is going to be, as mentioned before, the growth strategy in the 10th development plan and how well they are going to be implemented. We have 25 items, as was mentioned before, but I believe two of them are quite important. First, increasing savings, and second, increasing factor efficiency overall. Low saving ratios have an impact on 2 points. First is it prevents increasing investments, and second, it renders growth rate dependent on foreign investments. This is why growth rate is going to be fluctuating. As for total factor efficiency, between 2002 and 2016, 60, the increase in total factor efficiency was 3.2%. Growth rate was around 7%, and about half of it, 40% of it, stemmed from this increase in total factor efficiency. And later we see that there is a decrease by 0.5% in this total factor efficiency. We have to focus on this. You can talk about efficiency of agriculture and transition to industrial area and the efficiency it brings in, but we have already hit the limit about that. Some of our panelists also mentioned that we need to base our manufacturing structure on innovation. We have to do it really fast because experience of high income level countries indicate that if you don't have natural resources, high saving and total efficiency of total factor efficiency is going to get you out of tough times. The next panel is going to be about sustainable growth strategy, and I believe they are also going to go into details of these dimensions. I will also add a final sentence to conclude this session about participation in workforce. The current status is quite fine, and we know that participation in employment is going to continue by up to 2030, and at that point we are going to have an estimated participation number of 65 million. But this has to be backed up with quality in the education level. The technological and analytical aspect of it has to be improved. Investing in humans should be sustained all the time at an increasing pace in Turkey. So this is the end of the panel. Thank you for